This is Josh Ray, the Director of Economic Development for the City of Pekin. We're going to be doing a brief overview today of the fiscal year 2026-2027 Commercial Building Improvement Grant Program that is funded with our TIF funds. So, of course, take any questions at my email or phone number, but this presentation will hopefully give you what you need to make an application for a commercial project. So applications were out May 12th. They will be accepted through June 30th. I'm just going to start here with this overview that is on the city's website. If you just go to the homepage, you can find it under our little news flash section, and it gives you some bullet points, and then we're going to go through the program packet and the application, and then we'll show you how to use the GIS map to make sure that your project is going to qualify. So again, applications are available or accepted through June 30th. It is a competitive program, so you want to make sure you have the most competitive application that you can. In the last 2 years, 2 years ago, the program had 15 applicants. We were able to award 3 projects that year. Last year, I think there were 5 applications, and we awarded 4 projects. So just varies depending on the applications and the projects as to how many and how much get funded. This year, we do expect to fund $200,000 or up to $200,000. Ultimately, City Council reviews all of the recommended projects and makes decisions on funding, but staff intends to recommend $200,000 in projects. So that's the total amount available for the whole program this year. The individual maximum project award is $50,000, capped at 50% of the eligible expenses. So in order to get a $50,000 award, you have to be doing a $100,000 project. If your project is only $40,000, you can only get $20,000 in grant funding. And then generally, this isn't actually a hard and fast requirement. We're going to say that projects must be completed by April 30th, 2027. That's the end of the fiscal year, and it just makes the accounting much easier. But if it's a major project or there's some real extenuating circumstances that we are aware of up front, we can make the term of the grant longer, or rather the due date for the project further out. So let's go through the program packet. Again, this is a TIF program that is meant to promote the revitalization of commercial areas in any of the TIF districts throughout the city. So we'll look at the TIF map here in a minute, but you do have to be the owner or leasee of a building that is within a TIF district. We're not, going through a process to add properties to a TIF. That is a really lengthy and pretty costly process, so we don't really do that very often. So as part of this program, you have to already be in the TIF district. There are several throughout town, and even the districts that are, titled a residential TIF, that is not meaningful other than that's the title. That's just that was the primary goal of setting up that TIF district, but there are some commercial properties in those TIF districts, so those property owners are welcome to apply. On top of being in a TIF district, you do also have to be zoned primarily for commercial use. So it can't be, it can't be a house where you have your home business, right? These are really for commercial properties. And then you do have to be in good standing with the city in order to be eligible. So if you haven't paid your property taxes, if you have outstanding code enforcement violations, that kind of thing, you're not going to be eligible for funding. We do check all that before we make awards to the best of our ability. And then the projects themselves, make sure that you are applying for this before you are proceeding with your project. If you have already done your project, if you've already incurred expenses, anything before your application is turned in is automatically not eligible. That is a city council policy. So make sure, especially before you get a building permit, that you have turned in your application. Eligible expenses include basically any kind of building renovation. So think any of the trades: electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, facade improvements, windows and doors. All of those kinds of things are eligible expenses. If you need to upgrade or extend any utilities, electric, gas, water, sewer, that's eligible. If you need to do any cleanup of a property, demolish any part of it that's, not structurally sound or whatever the case might be, that is certainly eligible. If you need to do any public improvements, so if you need to fix the public sidewalk, pour a new public sidewalk, something like that, that's eligible. And then any costs that you would need to incur in order to plan for this. So particularly if you're going to be doing a major building renovation, you're probably, not necessarily, but a major building renovation is probably going to require an architectural stamp, especially if you're moving walls or anything like that. You're going to have an architectural stamp. So the architect's fees are eligible to turn in as reimbursable expenses. I would definitely read through these project terms. We will, for every single project that's awarded, we will have an individual TIF redevelopment agreement. That agreement will have a lot more language in it that I do recommend you read. It's not really negotiable. We have a standard form agreement that we do. So just make sure that you're okay with that before signing and proceeding with the project. But, the more meaningful terms that most people would care about, again, you can reimburse up to 50% of your eligible expenses. And that's the actual verified expenses. So you do have to keep track of all your invoices, and you have to show proof of payment for those invoices from you. You are considered the developer, right? You might hire a contractor to do the work, but as far as the city is concerned, we're entering into an agreement with you. You are the developer, and you need to keep track of all your costs and be able to turn those in with proof of payment. This is very important because proof of payment often gets people hung up. Preferably, checks I find are the easiest thing. So if you pay with a check, copy of the front and back of that check for each of those invoices. Alternatively, if you're going to use a credit card or make a bank wire transfer, a statement showing that expense very clearly being paid from your account is also acceptable. It gets very difficult if you pay in cash. The attorneys don't like, they like to have a real paper trail. They don't like it when people are just, pledging that, yes, I did pay that contractor with cash. And, 99% of the time, it's not a problem, and, we should be able to trust people, but it's that, 1% that makes us have rules. So make sure that you're tracking your invoices and that you have proof of payment. You're going to need to meet all requirements of law, so that includes any permits that you need to get for the work. You have to go through that process and get cleared with our building department. All of your projects improvements have to meet building codes and zoning codes as applicable, so typically not a very difficult process at all. Your contractors are typically going to know that process in the city of Pekin and be able to go through it without a problem, but just a heads up on that. You are going to be required to maintain the property, the improvements, and stay open for business for a period of not less than 1 year per $10,000 awarded. So if you are awarded a $5,000 grant, you need to stay open for at least a year. If you're awarded a $15,000 grant, you have to stay open for at least 2 years, and so on. So up to, if you get the full grant award of over $40,000 up to 50, then you're going to have to stay open for at least 5 years. And generally now, at least recently, we are writing into the TIF agreements that you can stay open anywhere within the city of Pekin limits. So kind of a discussion that council had recently. We don't want to limit people from growing, right? If you make improvements to a building now in one location, and then 2 years from now you're expanding and you need a bigger space, we don't want to, prohibit you from being able to expand within the city limits. We want you to grow, so you're able to move to a different location within the corporate limits of the city of Pekin and still be okay. You can, sell your building and or lease it out, do whatever you want, but you need to stay operational with your business for the appropriate period of time. You can be your own contractor. That happens occasionally. Just keep in mind that in such a case, we're really going to scrutinize the labor costs that you put in for. As long as they're reasonable, it's fine. I am going to go to the building official in that case and just make sure that, in his opinion, with his experience, that what you're asking for reimbursement on is reasonable. Again, most of the time people are hiring contractors, so it's, that is not applicable, but once in a while we do get a project like that. Always keep in mind that any improvements to public infrastructure do have to be made under prevailing wage. For anybody that doesn't know what that is, basically it's a requirement in the state of Illinois that projects that are for the benefit of the public, such as, again, that public sidewalk, or if you need to do some public sewer main or public water main or whatever for your project, you need to do that under what they call the prevailing wage, and that is essentially union level wages. There's actually a published Department of Labor chart. Might actually be a federal requirement now that I think about it, but there's a chart that's published that tells you, like, for each trade what the prevailing wage is. You are generally not going to have to worry about that as a property owner. You're going to hire a contractor for the most part, and that contractor is going to keep track of all those kinds of things. You actually don't have to turn any of that into the city of Pekin. It's either a state or federal requirement, and your contractor really should know that. But just keep that in mind. It's something to note with your contractor if you're going to have any public improvements. Again, we want to see projects completed by April 30th, the current fiscal year. If you've got a particularly large project, we can talk about that. And then just also a heads up that grant funding can be subject to income taxes. So keep that in mind. Talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyer, whoever you want to talk to about it. The city is not going to give you official tax or legal advice, but we have heard from CPAs or whoever that the grant income can be considered taxable income. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're receiving that grant income, but you're writing off an equivalent amount of business expense, and so they offset. But that is for you to figure out with your professional at your leisure. Additional terms might be added on a case-by-case basis. We do, again, have that redevelopment agreement for every project, and if there's any kind of conflict between the packet that I created here and the redevelopment agreement, then that development agreement that is executed by the city and yourself is going to control the conflict. Application checklist. This is, again, where we talk about here, and when we talk about evaluation criteria, this is where the strength of your application and the completeness of your application is going to matter. We can only fund so many projects. There's a limited amount of funding, and so we go through a scoring process to determine which projects should get funded. So make sure that you're including at least the completed TIF application, which we will look at, and an IRS Form W-9. That W-9 needs to be completed by whichever entity is going to incur the eligible expenses. So, if the property is owned by XYZ LLC, but the business that's doing the project is ABC, and they're going to be doing the expenses, then you need to give me a W-9 for ABC. One thing I think I forgot to mention earlier, I think it's up here though. Yeah, if you're a leasee of a building, we do require that we have consent from the property owner for all the improvements, and that property owner be a party to the redevelopment agreement. And that's just to protect the city, right? I mean, if you close up shop and leave, or close out your business, it becomes really hard for us to enforce the agreement. And it's typically a lot easier directly with the property owner. So the property owner needs to be involved, just to the extent that we can ensure that the city and the public funds are protected. We highly recommend getting at least 2, if not more, maybe 3 or 4 competitive quotes for all your improvements. So talk to a few contractors. If you're doing a complicated project or an involved project, I do recommend that you get in contact with our chief building official and fire inspector, just to have them, walk them through what you're planning on doing, so that there's no surprises when you go to do the project, right? Because if you're doing something at that scale, there's going to be a lot of inspections, and we've had situations where people have just started a project, and then they get halfway through it and are finding out that they need to do another $50,000, $100,000 worth of work that they were not prepared for to make that building code compliant. and that is not a good situation for anybody. So try to be proactive. The building official would be happy to walk through a building with you, talk about your improvements with your contractor. So I really recommend doing that. A project narrative is great. Please don't make it longer than a page, but just describe what you're doing, why you're doing it, what benefit it's going to have, both for your business and for the businesses around you, the community, that kind of thing. This project or this program is not it's not necessarily just to try to generate more tax revenue, right? We do have some programs that are, we tie the funds directly to your ability to increase sales tax or that kind of thing. That's not what this program is. This program is to try to improve the quality of our commercial spaces because, if a building needs $200,000 worth of work and somebody makes that investment today, that is a good long-term investment for the community to have for the next 20, 30, 50 years. And to get that building up to code compliance. So there is value in just making those improvements and making that space available for the next generation or two. And so this program is not about sales tax necessarily. I mean, it is one of the evaluation criteria, but it's just one component. But including in your project narrative, any kind of business plan, if it's going to be a new business, projected revenues and things like that is all great to help make your case for why you should get funded. Drawings and renderings are also really nice. Everybody likes to look at pictures, especially if we get a lot of applications. Pictures can really help make an application stand out. So we always recommend, they don't need to be professional grade engineered drawings, but something that's, to scale and shows what you're planning on doing is very nice. Like I said, financial estimates or a new business plan, if you're going to be starting a new business or really doing a major expansion, which is great. We really want to see that. But it's nice to have some numbers behind the plan and not just be making assumptions. Keep in mind any project changes that are significantly different from the approved plan. Those are probably going to have to go back to City Council. It's just a case-by-case basis, so have your plan ready. Don't just submit something without talking to a contractor or just having a conceptual idea, right? Have a little better plan in place so that you don't have any surprises again. All right, the evaluation criteria. So there's 3 major areas of evaluation: capacity, the improvements themselves, and then the economic impact. So 20% of the application or of the project is going to be based on the completeness and strength of your application. So again, doing all of these things is the best way to ensure that you get the highest possible score for the capacity. Your share of project expenses versus the city share is also a consideration here. So if you're doing a $50,000 project and you're asking for the full $25,000, right, 50%, that's fine. That's eligible. But if we would probably rather see a $100,000 investment with a $25,000 grant. So just keep that in mind, right? If you're the goal here being only ask for how much that you actually think you need to make the project happen. Your demonstrated ability to adhere to a grant program is great. So again, in that project narrative, if you've gotten a grant before, if you've had a small business loan or anything like that, that you can show that you have the ability to do what you say you're going to do and administer a project and turn in your invoices and that kind of thing. That's great. It's not typically a problem for us, but it becomes problematic and can take a lot of staff time and a lot of resources to navigate projects with folks that are just not very adept to doing this kind of thing. Certainly happy to work with anybody. Don't be afraid to apply for this. If you've never done a grant or a loan or anything, we encourage you to apply. And if you have any concerns or questions, please reach out to me and we can talk through those, because again, we want people to apply for this program. And then your adherence to the program requirements. So don't be don't be I don't know, going to um, the city manager and trying to get him to tell me that I need to score your project higher, right? You need to follow the program, follow the requirements, turn in your application on time, and we'll be good to go. The improvements, 40% of the score. So in this, we're going to consider the current condition of the building and the need for the improvements, right? We like aesthetic improvements. We like things to look nice and beautify the town, but primarily we're looking for improvements that have a meaningful impact on the life of that commercial space, and reducing the blight in that area. So we want to fix serious problems with buildings, and then if there's some aesthetic stuff on top of that, that's great too. So right there, the next point, extent to which your proposed improvements will restore, maintain, or enhance that building and the area. Kind of a different philosophies for how to do these programs. Some communities like to give out a lot of really small grants. My personal and professional philosophy is that we should be doing major improvements with a smaller number of projects each year, and then over the course of several years, we have made real meaningful change to our commercial corridors by getting buildings, significantly upgraded. And that's at least the last couple years, that's been what the city council has been wanting to see as well. So that's the goal. If there's historic or architectural significance of the building, that'll help your score. That's primarily going to be in the downtown area, although not necessarily. So in your project narrative, feel free to describe any of that. And then any prior city funding for improvements on the property. It's a little bit counterintuitive, because if you've had grants before and you've had successful projects, that shows that you're able to use the money well, which is great. But we don't want the same person to be getting, this grant every single year, and nobody else getting anything. So we do try to, it's just because you got a grant in the past doesn't mean you're ineligible, but we do like to spread the money around and give opportunities to a variety of property owners. Lastly, economic impact, another 40% of the score. Your estimated new tax revenue to be generated, number of jobs created. Again, whether that's your new business or an expanding business, that is a really important thing. We like to see new jobs. And then other just kind of activity generated by the business. It's a little hard to quantify. But, for example, and I don't mean to pick on anybody in particular, but just for example, a professional office like an attorney's office or an accountant's office, those are not going to generate more activity for the commercial corridor so much as, a restaurant or a recreational space or something like that will. So we do that to take into account other things, right? Like if it's an activity that kids, if it's a business that allows a space for kids activities, that's going to probably generate a lot of traffic. And while that business might not generate a bunch of sales tax or anything, that traffic generated to that commercial corridor will have some impact on other businesses, which is positive and good. So we try to take that into account as well. Let's go through the review process. Preliminary meeting is highly encouraged, although not required. Again, I talked about it before, so I won't belabor the point, but really I recommend meeting with the chief building official and myself prior to completing an application. Just makes things run a whole lot smoother. After June 30th, staff will look at all the applications, and this is myself. I will look at all the applications and score them based on the criteria that we just went through, and that allows me then to in an impartial way prioritize and make recommendations to the city council. They can always change my recommendation, right? They can completely throw my recommendation out and fund whatever projects they want. They could decide to fund nothing. They have total prerogative and control over the TIF funds, but that is the process, right? And for the most part, they're going to follow the recommendations because they are based on a scoring criteria, right? I don't play favorites, so the best projects are going to be the ones that get recommended based on those scoring criteria. So again, staff will do a review, we'll recommend to City Council. That staff review is going to take place in the first part of July, and the plan is to go to City Council at the second City Council meeting in July, as long as everything goes how it's supposed to. So that would be on July 27th is when staff will actually bring forward the recommendations to City Council for a vote. So then after you get an agreement, right, after council votes, we'll get the agreement to you for your review and signature. Once you've signed the agreement, you are good to go. You can proceed with your project, get it completed, and then turn in a packet of, there's going to be a short just request for reimbursement that you'll fill out and sign. And you'll attach to that all of those invoices and proof of payment. Before and after pictures are great, just for PR purposes. We like to see that. I do have a really big check, the dry erase board check that when we're ready to actually reimburse you for your grant award, we can come down and get a photo op and show off your improvements and get some pictures. So we'll do that kind of thing, but make sure that you have documented all those expenses like I discussed before. Make sure you've got all your inspections and that you have an active certificate of occupancy from our community development department, from our chief building official. And then we will just simply mail you a check to the party and to the address on that W-9 that you submitted. And then we just always have a disclaimer in the packet that, we reserve the right to change how this program goes. I don't foresee any changes. This has been a pretty stable program the last several years. The funding is a little bit more this year, which is awesome. But just note that, the city council can always decide to fund whatever projects they want. They, by state law, they have the authority to do that. Here's my contact information. Whoops. Shoot me an email. This is my desk line. I have a lot of voicemails, so I'm sorry if I don't get back to you right away. Email is probably a better way to get a hold of me. Or feel free to stop in the front desk, and if I'm here, I'll be happy to chat with you if I'm available. Real quick, let's go through the TIF application, because it can kind of look intimidating. So there's some general information at the top. The developer information, that will be you. That will be, the business owner that is applying for the grant funding. It's not your contractor, it's you. So you're the developer. You can, if you are going to be getting the award personally, you can put your name down, or if you want it in your LLC, just put whatever entity down, your business type and your contact information. I'll show you how to look up your TIF district. So you just put your TIF district down. You're in the city of Pekin. We use a firm called Jacob & Klein in the Economic Development Consulting Group. So they have kind of this standard form for all the municipalities they work for, so that's why that's there. And they review everything, right? They review all the expenses, they draft the application, so it's not just me making decisions and doing things, just so everybody knows. We do have some other professionals involved. Project name, very simple. You can just put, renovation of, 123 Court Street or whatever your address is. Anticipated start and end date. If you don't want to necessarily submit a project narrative, I do recommend just at least putting a couple of sentences here about what you're going to do. If it's just total renovation of the building, that's fine, or if you're going to do something else, but just try to put something there, or you can just say, see attached narrative. Your projects are going to be either industrial or commercial. Give us the property address, your PIN number. It has to be in a TIF district, so you're going to check yes there, and then put down the date when you acquired the property. You can apply for this program if you are intending to acquire a building. In that case, I like to see a purchase agreement or something of that nature, or if just something that indicates that you're actually moving forward with that process, right? A title commitment, something like that. Certainly understand sometimes people are potentially buying a building, but it's going to need work and they only want to buy it if they can get a grant to help with that work. that's fine. If that's the case, we've probably talked already. If we haven't, we should. So reach out to me. But you can put, pending closing on X date or something like that. So just keep that in mind. If you have multiple PIN numbers, you can put them down. These are not residential projects. You can skip this whole section. Right here, we want to know what your total project investment is going to be. So if you're buying property, if you're doing other things that are not necessarily eligible expenses, we want the whole shebang of what you think you're going to spend on this project. We want to know how many jobs you think you're going to create at the end of it, and of that, how many full-time jobs. If you have sales, right, maybe you're a service business, that's fine. You're still eligible to apply. But if you have sales, we want to know your annual retail sales now and projected after your improvements. This is, I would say, somewhat scrutinized, so don't just throw something out there pie in the sky, right? Be reasonable. And again, in your project narrative, you can include some justification for why you think it's going to hopefully increase. But for example, we had a project last year that showed like a 100% increase in sales taxes projected, and one of the council members, and I don't blame them. They just thought that was unreasonable. So just be reasonable, have some justification if it's going to be really substantial. And again, retail sales, meaning sales that are going to be taxable. Estimated eligible expenses. Again, we have the same form for all the applications for all of our different TIF programs. So a lot of this is just not going to be, perhaps not applicable to your project. In particular, land acquisition cost is not something that we do for this program. That is generally a TIF eligible expense, but for this program, we're not helping people just buy buildings. But any site preparation, cleanup, demolition of part of the building, that's all eligible. And like we went through before, professional fees related is eligible. Job training, I think, is actually a really cool TIF eligible expense. It's not something we fund with this program. The meat and potatoes, the majority of your application is going to be this line right here, just probably one number for rehabilitation or renovation of your building. Up at the top, it's got phase 1 and phase 2. Typically, this program is just going to have a phase 1, right? You're just going to do one project and turn in your expenses. So don't worry about phase 2 unless it's more complicated, and we've talked about it separately. So again, that renovation line is going to be where the majority of expenses are in your application. You can, just put a total number there, and then you can attach, quotes or a summary of expenses broken out. That's always really helpful, right? The city council likes to see, they don't just like to see, I'm going to spend $100,000. They want to see, hey, I've gotten quotes. Here's the contractors I intend to use. For electrical, it's going to be $20,300. For plumbing, it's going to be $18,200. And, they like to see that level of detail has been put into your application. Public infrastructure, sidewalks especially, if that's going to be included, great. Utilities, extension, water, gas, sewer, electric can be in there. We are not funding any interest expenses with this program, so you can skip that one. Typically, there are not any other miscellaneous expenses. I mean, this pretty well lays out what the state law allows for TIF expenses. But if you think you have something else that's eligible that doesn't fit in there, feel free to put it down, and if it's eligible and makes sense for this program, we might fund it. Any other notes or comments are great. This last page is just a bunch of information about the city and our legal firm and consultant that I referenced before, talking about what we do, our responsibilities and authority. And then you are the private developer. You make a signature. For the title, you can just put owner or leasee, whatever you want to put. And that's your application. So it looks like a lot, but again, most of it is just going to be like general contact information and stuff on the front page, a little bit of property information on the second page, and then some basic project info, mostly that rehabilitation and renovation number right here. So the last thing I want to show you, we're at about 35 minutes, so that's not bad. The last thing I want to show you is the TIF district map. So if you're not sure if your property is in the TIF, you can go to this map. And sometimes, if we're doing maintenance on our GIS platforms, which I hope is not happening right now, looks like it might be. Sometimes the map won't load for you. If that's the case, you can always just shoot me an email and make sure that it's eligible. Or if you look at your property taxes and you go down to where all of the taxing bodies are, right? The schools, the city, the park district, the community college, the county, one of those lines will have a TIF district on there if you are in a TIF. So that's an easy way to tell. I'm going to see if this map will load for me. Well, that's unfortunate. Let's try this. See if that'll work. Nope. Let's try this one. All right, well, I guess our maps are down, so apologies for that. But generally, here I'll pull up the county GIS map. This will give you an idea. It works basically the same. But it's only for the TIF districts. It'll be kind of like this, where you can put in your address. So if we just put in the city hall address, maybe. There we go. Nope. Wonder if it thinks we're just 111 capital. There we go. So that's City Hall. It would kind of work the same, where you would see the different TIF districts in different colors, and it would be obvious if your property is in or out. But real quick, let me show you. So this is what your property tax information looks like. Let me just click on a. Well, we can do this. So if you scroll down on your tax bill, you'll see all of the different taxing bodies, and you can see this one says it's in a TIF district. The city is tax exempt, so our property doesn't show any number there, but that is how that would show on your tax bill. Again, projects are due by June 30th. If there's a reason that you think you can't meet that deadline, but you think you can get it in within the next week, let me know, and I'll probably dock you a couple points on the capacity score. But if there's a particular reason that you can't get it, especially if it's for whatever reason, some reason, you want to do a walkthrough with the city and we're not available. I don't know what the reason might be, but just let me know, and we can probably still get your application included. But the deadline to get full points and all of that is June 30th. I won't guarantee that anything submitted after that will be eligible for the program. So June 30th is a good deadline to meet. If you have any questions, my contact information is in the program packet. That's what I'll leave up at the end here, I guess. And I look forward to hearing from you and seeing your applications.